The ancient Egyptians are known for their spectacular and frighteningly chilling burials, and over the centuries, archaeologists have found a lot of things that were included in these millennia-old tombs. From the infamous Book of the Dead, which was meant to help the dead navigate the afterlife, to mummy portraits that look strangely realistic, ancient Egyptians believed that death was not an ending. It was a journey into another world. And for that journey, they buried their dead with objects they considered too valuable, too sacred, or too powerful to just leave behind. But recently, archaeologists discovered treasures that had not been seen for more than 2,500 years. So, what did the ancient Egyptians know about death that we don't? Why did they devote so much to a world no one had ever seen? And could these treasures reveal forgotten secrets? The Egyptian tombs with hundreds of hidden treasures, the Ramesseum, has stood on the west bank of Luxor for more than 3,000 years. It was built by Pharaoh Ramses II, often called Ramses the Great, during the 13th century BC. This enormous temple is famous for its colossal statues, towering columns, and wild scenes celebrating military victories. For decades, it has been one of Egypt's most studied ancient sites, which makes what happened there in April 2024 all the more surprising. After 34 years of excavation and restoration work, a joint Egyptian-French archaeological mission announced that some of the most incredible finds were not coming from the temple itself, but from the ground surrounding it. In the northeast of the Ramesseum, archaeologists have discovered a large cemetery dating to the Third Intermediate Period, more than 2,500 years ago. Buried beneath the surface were tombs built around deep shafts leading to underground burial chambers. Inside, researchers found hundreds of objects left behind by people who expected to need them after death. Among them were canopic jars, the containers used to store organs removed during mummification. Archaeologists also recovered 400 Ushapti figures. These small statues were not decorations. Ancient Egyptians believed they would come to life in the next world and do work on behalf of the deceased. Well, that belief raises an interesting and terrifying question. What kind of afterlife were these people preparing for that required hundreds of servants? Did they know something we don't? But the discoveries did not stop there. In this temple, excavations revealed storage facilities once used for olive oil, honey, and wine, along with ancient jar labels that somehow survived the passage of centuries. Archaeologists also identified weaving workshops, bakeries, stoneworking areas, kitchens, and administrative buildings. Taken together, the finds suggest that the Ramesseum was far more than a temple dedicated to Ramses II. It was the center of a vast operation that managed food, workers, education, and religious activity. For archaeologists, the discovery was about more than treasure. Every Ushapti figure, every canopic jar, and every burial chamber points to a belief that death was not the end of the story, but only the beginning. The mummies buried with golden tongues when archaeologists opened a series of rock-cut tombs at Taposiris Magna, near Alexandria. They expected to find mummies from Egypt's Greek and Roman periods. What they did not expect was to find some of them with tongues made of gold. The discovery was announced after an Egyptian Dominican archaeological mission excavated 16 burials dating back roughly 2,000 years. Many of the mummies were poorly preserved, but one detail immediately stood out. Inside several mouths were thin gold foil amulets, carefully shaped into the form of human tongues. The reason behind them reaches deep into ancient Egyptian beliefs about death. Egyptians believed that after death, the soul would stand before Osiris, the ruler of the underworld and judge of the dead. To successfully navigate that encounter, the deceased needed the ability to speak. Some archaeologists believe the golden tongues were placed inside the mouths of the dead to ensure they could communicate with Osiris in the afterlife. The tombs contained other intriguing discoveries as well. One mummy was partially wrapped in cartonnage decorated with gilded images of Osiris himself. Another displayed a crown, horns, a cobra, and a falcon symbol associated with Horus. Archaeologists also recovered a woman's funerary mask, 8 golden flakes from a wreath, and 8 marble masks from the Greek and Roman eras. What makes the discovery so fascinating is that gold was not chosen by accident. Ancient Egyptians believed the flesh of the gods was made from gold. If that belief was true in their minds, then these tongues may have been intended as something more than decoration. They may have been a final gift, created to help the dead speak in a world beyond the grave. The alien dagger of King Tutankhamun. When Howard Carter opened Tut's tomb in 1922, he found more than 500 objects packed into the burial chambers, but one of the most mysterious objects was small enough to fit in a hand. It was a dagger. At first, the weapon looked unworthy compared to the mountains of gold found inside the tomb. However, modern scientific analysis revealed something extraordinary. The blade was not made from ordinary iron mined on Earth. It came from a meteorite. Using X-ray fluorescence analysis, researchers discovered that the dagger contained nearly 11% nickel, along with traces of cobalt, a chemical signature commonly found in iron meteorites. Those metals are rarely present in iron produced from terrestrial ores, leaving little doubt about the blade's origin. That discovery raises a fascinating possibility. More than 3,300 years ago, long before iron smelting became common, ancient craftsmen were already working with metal that had fallen from the sky. Tut's dagger was not the only example. Similar meteoritic iron objects have been found at Girgeh in Egypt, at Ala Hike in Turkey, and at Ugarit in northern Syria. Research suggests that many of the rare iron artifacts produced during the Bronze Age were crafted from meteorites rather than from smelted ore. Ancient texts reveal just how valuable such objects were. During the Bronze Age, iron could be worth 10 times more than gold. To people living at the time, a weapon forged from a stone that had fallen from the heavens may have seemed like more than a luxury. It may have been viewed as something holy and divine. The silver pharaoh whose treasures rivaled King Tut. When people think of the richest pharaoh ever discovered, one name usually comes to mind: Tutankhamun. After all, when Howard Carter opened the boy king's tomb in 1922, the world was stunned by the sheer amount of gold packed inside. But less than 20 years later, another discovery emerged from Egypt that was just as extraordinary. Almost nobody noticed. In 1940, as Europe was being consumed by World War II, French archaeologist Pierre Montet made a remarkable discovery at Tanis in Egypt's Nile Delta. Hidden beneath the ruins was the tomb of Psusennes I, a ruler of the 21st dynasty who reigned between roughly 1047 and 1001 BC. Historians had long assumed that the kings of this period were relatively weak rulers. Egypt was politically divided, with Lower Egypt controlled from Tanis while powerful high priests dominated Upper Egypt from Thebes. By all appearances, this was a time of decline. Then the tomb was opened. Inside stood an extraordinary silver anthropoid coffin nested within a pink granite coffin, which itself rested inside a granite sarcophagus originally belonging to Merenta, the son and successor of Ramses II. In ancient Egypt, silver was rarer than gold and often considered even more valuable because it had to be imported from distant lands across the Mediterranean and Western Asia. The discovery shattered old assumptions. Alongside the coffin were magnificent treasures, including a spectacular gold funerary mask, jewelry, canopic jars, shabtis, and objects whose craftsmanship rivaled those found in Tutankhamun's tomb. The mummy itself had been destroyed by the damp conditions of the delta, but the treasures survived. For archaeologists, the tomb raised an intriguing possibility. If a supposedly minor pharaoh could be buried with such astonishing wealth, how much do we really know about Egypt's so-called Age of Decline? The faces that refuse to disappear. Most people imagine ancient Egyptian mummies as anonymous figures wrapped in linen, their identities lost to time. But some of the most haunting treasures ever discovered in Egypt tell a very different story. Between the 1st and 4th centuries AD, during Egypt's Roman period, families began attaching painted portraits to their mummified dead. These were not idealized images of gods, kings, or heroes. They were real people. Men, women, and children stared back with remarkably lifelike expressions, making the portraits feel surprisingly modern despite being nearly 2,000 years old. The practice became especially common in the Fayum region of Egypt, where archaeologists uncovered dozens of these portraits preserved by the dry desert climate. Painted on wooden panels and later on burial shrouds, they were neatly placed over the faces of the deceased before burial. One of the most famous examples is the portrait of Artemidoros from Hawara, which dates to around AD 100 to 120. The young man is shown wearing a golden laurel wreath, a symbol that he had overcome death itself. Nearly 2,000 years later, his gaze remains as sharp and direct as the day the portrait was painted. That is what makes these treasures so disturbing. Most ancient civilizations left behind statues, carvings, and inscriptions. Very few left behind faces. Looking at a mummy portrait is not like looking at ancient art. It feels more like making eye contact with someone who lived, breathed, and walked the streets of Roman Egypt centuries ago. For archaeologists, these portraits preserve something even rarer than gold. They preserve individual lives that history might otherwise have completely forgotten. The golden mask of the Egyptian king on November 26, 1922. Howard Carter peered through a small opening into a sealed chamber in the Valley of the Kings. When asked whether he could see anything inside, his famous reply was simple: yes, wonderful things. Among those wonders was a treasure that would become the most recognizable symbol of ancient Egypt itself. 3 years later, in 1925, Carter found the gold funerary mask of Tut resting over the head of the young king's mummy, buried for more than 3,000 years inside tomb KV62. The mask was never intended to be a display piece. It had a far more important purpose. Ancient Egyptians believed that the soul needed to recognize its body after death. The mask served as both protection and identification, ensuring that Tut could successfully make the journey into the afterlife. Magical texts from chapter 151b of the Book of the Dead were inscribed on the back, while the cobra goddess Wadjet and the vulture goddess Nekbet guarded his brow, symbolizing Lower and Upper Egypt united under one ruler. This 22-pound mask was decorated with lapis lazuli, obsidian, quartz, carnelian, colored glass, and semi-precious stones. Every detail carried religious meaning, but one mystery remains. Some Egyptologists have suggested that parts of the mask may originally have been made for another royal figure, possibly Neferneferuaten, who may have been Queen Nefertiti ruling as king. If it's true, then the world's most famous Egyptian treasure might not have been created for Tut at all. The treasure that no one was supposed to find, Karnak Temple, has been excavated for years. Archaeologists have mapped its courtyards, cleared its halls, documented its inscriptions, and uncovered countless statues, shrines, and monuments. Because of that, most people think there cannot be much left to find. But that assumption was just proven wrong. While excavating the northern section of Karnak, experts found a broken ceramic vessel buried beneath the ground. Containers like this are not unusual in Egypt. What was unusual was what happened when they looked inside. The vessel was packed with gold. Not one or two objects, but an entire collection of rings, amulets, beads, brooches, and miniature figurines dating back more than 2,500 years to Egypt's 26th dynasty. Somehow, this treasure had remained hidden beneath one of the most famous archaeological sites on Earth, while millions of visitors passed through Karnak and generations of researchers searched its ruins. The discovery immediately raised a question. Why would so many valuable objects be gathered together and buried inside a single container? Ancient Egypt was entering one of the most turbulent chapters in its history during this period. Foreign powers threatened the country, political alliances shifted, and the dynasty would eventually collapse when Persian forces invaded Egypt in 525 BC. Was somebody trying to protect these valuables from an approaching crisis? Were they hidden during a time of uncertainty and never recovered? Or was the cache deliberately buried as a sacred offering intended for the ancient gods of Karnak? The golden chariot buried for a king's final journey. When Howard entered Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, he also found something unexpected in the antechamber. Carefully dismantled and stacked among the treasures were 6 chariots, each more than 3,300 years old. Among them was a ceremonial vehicle, unlike anything most people imagine when they think of ancient Egypt. This was not a battlefield machine. Its wooden frame was covered with elaborate gilded decoration. Spiraling golden patterns covered the cabin, while the cartouches of Tutankhamun appeared prominently across its upper sections. Animal skins covered the floor, and leather thongs were woven together to create a flexible platform for the rider. Every detail seems to have been designed for display rather than war. The chariot also served as a powerful statement of royal authority. Inside the cabin were symbols representing Upper and Lower Egypt, while kneeling enemies appeared beneath them with ropes around their necks. Decorative scenes showed the young king as a sphinx triumphing over African and Asiatic foes. On the rear of the vehicle appeared the dwarf god Bez, his tongue protruding as a protective symbol intended to ward off evil. The story becomes even more interesting when considering the history of the chariot itself. Horses and horse-drawn chariots were not native Egyptian inventions. They were introduced by the Hyksos after their arrival in Egypt around 1650 BC. Within a few centuries, however, the chariot had become one of the most important symbols of Egyptian kingship. What makes Tutankhamun's ceremonial chariot so fascinating is that it was never intended for an ordinary journey. More than 3,000 years ago, someone carefully dismantled it and placed it inside the king's tomb. The ancient Egyptians clearly believed that wherever King Tut was going after death, he might still need a royal chariot when he arrived. The treasure that unlocked ancient Egypt by the end of the 4th century AD, something remarkable had happened in Egypt. A writing system that had covered temple walls, tombs, monuments, and statues for thousands of years had become completely unreadable. The last known hieroglyphic inscription was carved in AD 394, and over the centuries that followed, the meaning of the symbols was lost. Ancient Egypt was suddenly surrounded by silence. People could see the inscriptions, but nobody knew what they said. Some scholars believed hieroglyphs were nothing more than symbolic pictures with no real language behind them. Others spent years trying and failing to decode them. Then, in 1799, French soldiers serving under Napoleon made an unexpected discovery near the town of Rosetta. Carved onto a granodiorite stone was the same text written 3 times, in hieroglyphs, Demotic, and ancient Greek. The message itself was hardly extraordinary. It was a decree issued in 196 BC praising King Ptolemy V. Yet the stone contained something far more valuable than gold. For the first time, scholars had a translation key. 20 years later, Jean-François Champollion finally succeeded in deciphering the hieroglyphs. Suddenly, texts that had remained silent for nearly 1,500 years could be read again. Tomb inscriptions, royal decrees, funerary texts, and temple records all began revealing their secrets. The Rosetta Stone did not contain Egypt's greatest treasure. It made it possible to understand all the others. If you've enjoyed watching this video, be sure to like it and subscribe. Thanks for hanging with us, and we'll see you soon.